I just wanted to do a quick little update video on this Chrysler slash Toyota bearing modification. I'm just going to do this freehand here real quick. So this and these are the two bearings I'd gotten from the Chrysler engine. This is one of the bearings I removed from the Toyota that's still, tolerable, barely tolerable. So I've got the oil hole. I've got the outer edges cut down enough to where the oil hole that's going to be the for the gallery that squirts up underneath the piston, so that's in the right location. I've even got these upper corners pinned so that hopefully they'll not spin in the bearing caps or the rod big end bearing caps themselves. Now, it probably looks like the curvature is pretty darn good on video, but the reality is I don't have the curvature perfect. I'll see if I can set it in there to illustrate that point. Oops. Hard to do this one-handed. I think you can just barely see the air gap at the bottom there. So, again, considering the temporary nature of this, I'm just not that worried about it. But I'll kind of take you over to the vise, and I'll show you approximately how I came up with this. Considering the fact that I know no matter what I do, this isn't going to last very long, I just very crudely bent and barely hammered using this piece of aluminum to get a little tighter radius. I actually put it in the vice jaws to do that, but I just wanted to show you this little trick. And I took a little bit off of both ends so that I could get the oil hole exactly where I wanted the oil hole without having to drill a new hole. If I would have cut all the material off of one end, I would have had to drill a second hole in for the oil. So this was a good compromise. Once I got the curvature to a spot where I was happy with, I set it in the bearing caps and I scored both sides and then brought it over to the bandsaw and whoop, zipped it off there. Then I filed it up, filed the edges so that I took care of all the burrs and whatnot and gave it a little bit of a chamfer. Then I took this hideous chisel, put the bearing cap in here, put the bearing in the bearing cap, and then a really thin piece of wood, and clamped the bearing into the bearing cap. And then I just gave it a real quick hit or real quick smack with this chisel, and voila. I've got a bearing that I think will work. This width is definitely a little bit wider than the factory Toyota bearings, but it looks like there's enough clearance on the crankshaft to get away with it. If it's not, I will yet run these across one of my belt sanders and thin this down a little bit. But I still need to crawl under the car and clean up the crankshaft at least a little bit so that these will fit. And I have the connecting rod big end is egg-shaped. So it's possible I may have to take some action to open up the bearings because they're a little bit or open up the bearing caps because they're a little bit too narrow right now. I mean, I can force it on there, but I'd like to give this the best chance of being a cobbled together piece of crap that I can. So it may possibly be necessary to open them up and get them closer to where they're supposed to be before I can actually assemble this. I'm going to crawl underneath the car yet tonight and clean up the crankshaft, and maybe if I'm lucky, get this thing reassembled. But I still have a little bit of stuff to do on top to get the car back together again so it's in running shape again. And I know already that it doesn't run perfect. So there's going to be some hiccups with it not wanting to run right when I first get it back together. That will most likely have nothing to do with this crummy bearing, but cross that bridge when I get to it. I might need to throw some fuel injector cleaner or something in it to get the injectors working again, because I don't know how long this thing is sat. Other than that, the only other thing I was going to make a funny of is we ought to place bets, or maybe not bets, but we ought to all chime in and see how long we think this will run on these Chrysler bearings. So anyways, I'll stop wiggling my camera and I'll catch up with you guys later. Hopefully tomorrow I can post a video of this thing firing up for the first time on Chrysler bearings.